Welcome to Praise, Prayer and Preaching with the Rev Dr Rick Dacey, Senior Minister, Wesley Congregational Life.
We heard tonight from Luke 18. Back in Luke 11, Jesus teaches his disciples how to pray. We might be familiar with that teaching. He teaches what we know as the Lord's Prayer. It is the most extraordinary God-centered prayer. Wholly God-centered. It comes before God in awe and wonder, and then it moves into an acknowledgement of our complete and utter dependence upon God. Spiritually, physically, wholly dependent upon God. And now, here in chapter 18, Jesus is again talking about prayer. But this time, Luke tells us that he is talking to people who don't want to depend on anyone. People who don't want to depend on each other, and they don't want to depend on God. They trust in themselves, in their own righteousness. And they look down on everyone else, Luke tells us. Now, Luke is writing in Greek. And the wording that he chooses is actually a lot stronger in the Greek than we find in our English translation here. What Luke is talking about, when Luke says that Jesus is talking to people who are looking down on everyone else, the word that he chooses for looking down is exoutheneuntas. That's going to be on the quiz. That's not going to be on the quiz. This is going to be on the quiz. Exoutheneuntas means despising. They're not just looking down, despising. And it's a very strong word. It's only used one other time in all of the four Gospels. Luke uses it when he's talking about the Herod and his soldiers in Luke 23. Herod and his soldiers have this is how they regard Jesus, with contempt. They despise him. So let's not lose sight of how strong this word is as we enter into this story. It's a very strong word. It's important to keep that in mind, that the people Jesus is talking to, they're not just spiritual snobs. They have contempt for those people. You know what I'm talking about. Those sinners. They despise those people who Jesus always seems so eager to hang around with, to lump himself in with. So here, Jesus is talking to this contemptuous mob. And he tells them a parable about two guys praying. One is this respectable religious leader, a Pharisee, and the other is a traitorous tax collector, a collaborator with the occupying Romans. The Pharisee in Jesus' parable, he comes off as a bit of a jerk. He stands and he prays, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even this tax collector. Meanwhile, the other guy, the tax collector, stands at a distance, and all he can pray is, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. You see what the Pharisee has done here. You see what he's working on? He has made himself a sort of righteousness scale where he can be measured for his righteousness. And he's got people applauded on it that he can compare himself. You know, he's got a scale, kind of looks like this. And now he's thought, well, now here's us. Here's us good, righteous folk, people like me. And here are those people those robbers, those evildoers, those adulterers, those fill in the blank. They're all sinners, like this tax collector praying over here. Now he's got everyone sorted out. He's got them plotted on his righteousness scale right here. Now, of course, God and his righteousness, well, they're off the scale. The Pharisee knows this. He knows this. But he comforts himself in the knowledge that his strict religious practice puts him closer than the tax collector and all those other sinners. It puts him closer to God. And you know what? He's right. It does. His good works, his good deeds, they do put him closer to God and his righteousness than the tax collector and those other sinners. He is closer. Somebody right now is saying, uh-oh, here comes the heresy. Stay with me. He is closer. So, for example, and this is what I mean. For example, the Pharisee observes the biblical tithe. He gives away 10% of what he gets, and he mentions this in his prayer. Yes, that's a good thing. That's a righteous thing to do. That's a godly thing to do. And the Pharisee knows that because he reads that in Scripture. He has no question about that. Now, we might question whether he gives that 10% with a spirit of generosity. We might question his motives. It sounds like maybe he's ticking off a religious box rather than reflecting the extraordinary generosity of God. But still, regardless of his motive, it's a good thing to do. And it does put him closer to God on the spectrum of righteousness, on his scale of righteousness, and say the tax collector. See, tax collectors, they don't give away 10%. They take 10%. They don't give away, they take their percentage. That's the tax collection racket. A tax collector collects taxes from their fellow Jews on behalf of the Roman Empire. As you can imagine, this doesn't make them the most popular people in town. All the taxes that a tax collector collects, all the taxes that he collects, go to support the Roman military occupation of the country. You can see why people would resent, even detest, tax collectors. But here's the thing. Tax collectors don't earn a wage. They don't draw a salary for their work. You know how tax collectors get rich? They add a percentage onto people's taxes. And they have some discretion in terms of how much they're going to add onto people's taxes because they're adding it for their own personal gain and enrichment. So, for example, let's say someone owes 90 shekels to the Romans. And the tax collector, he might collect 100 shekels. They owe 90, he'll collect 100. 90 for the Roman occupiers and 10 for himself. He'll take 10% from the fisherman's family. He'll take 10% from the potter's family. He'll take 10% from the Pharisee's family. Maybe not 10%. He takes as much as he can get away with. There's no regulation on this. He might take 15. He might take 20%. And he uses the intimidating power of the Roman army to work for him, to get what he wants, to get as much as he can squeezed out of people. If someone protests, well, he might say, now, I'm sure that you can find the money somewhere. Better to hand it over to me here in my tax booth than to have soldiers kicking in your door in the middle of the night, don't you think? Pulling you from your bed in front of your children, your wife, the neighbors. No, pay what you owe, and I'll personally see to it that that doesn't happen to you. So in fact, the Pharisee is right. He is not like those sinners. He's not. He's not like those other people. He's not like that tax collector. And his religious practice does put him closer to God and to God's righteousness. And now, if we pull back and expand a little bit, we're going to see. Because the question is, how much closer? How much closer? We can see if we pull back. God and his righteousness are off the chart now. But if we pull back a little bit, we can see, well, God's still off the chart here. Let's pull back a little further. God is still off the chart. God and his righteousness are still off the chart. Well, let's pull back a little further, get a better perspective here. God and his righteousness are still off the chart. We pull back even further. God and his righteousness are still off the chart. We pull way back. God and his righteousness are still far off the chart. So far, if we could make this chart unimaginably, impossibly big, if we could stretch this screen from here to the end of the known universe and draw that line, God and his righteousness would still be off the chart. But you notice what's happening here. The more we pull back and see the length of this scale of righteousness, look what has happened to the Pharisee. He's gotten closer and closer to that tax collector. In fact, we see he's infinitely closer to that tax collector than he is to the righteousness of God. Even the most righteous, the most Bible-believing, the most clean-living Pharisee is going to be infinitely closer to the tax collector than to the righteousness of God. And Jesus reveals this in his parable. Jesus reveals that in reality, they're in the same boat. It would be easy for us to dismiss this Pharisee as a villain. We hear Pharisee, and maybe even we already dismiss him as a villain. It would be easy for us to do that. But that's not Jesus' intent. Jesus doesn't want us to plot ourselves on our own righteousness scale, contrasting our humility with the pride and arrogance of the Pharisee. Jesus isn't telling this parable to vilify Pharisees. Jesus isn't telling this parable to vilify anyone. Jesus is telling this parable not for condemnation and doom. This is a parable of hope. Hope for the Pharisee. Hope for you and for me. It's hope for us because God knows how easy it is for us to slip into that prayer that the Pharisee prays. God, thank you that I am not like those people. Whoever those people may be for each of us. Or even thank God that I am not like that legalistic Pharisee. We all need to hear the hope in this parable. In Jesus' parable. Let me ask you, what do you see when you look at the Pharisee? This man looking down his nose at everyone, sneering at the tax collector, detesting the tax collector, holding the tax collector in contempt. What do you see? Do you see judgmental pride and arrogance? Do you see self-centered, self-absorbed, self-righteousness? I'll tell you what I can see. I see fear. Desperate, desperate fear. I see someone who is afraid, desperately afraid of rejection. I see the cowardly schoolyard bully who pushes others down, trying desperately to pull himself up. I see fear. I see panic. I see terror. Look at him. I mean, you can tell by the way he's standing and praying with that puffed up spiritual bravado. And there's a double whammy in the Greek in Luke's telling of this story that doesn't come through in the English translation. The word here that's translated himself can refer to the Pharisee standing and to his praying. So Luke has placed this word ambiguously. He's placed it in a way where it can be read both that the Pharisee is standing by himself and that he is praying to himself. He declares his self-directed, self-obsessed prayer inwardly to himself and declares, I fast twice a week. I give a tenth of all I get. Can you hear the fear? He has his boxes ticked. He doesn't appeal to God. He doesn't ask for God's help. He doesn't ask for God's provision. He doesn't ask for God's mercy. The way he sees it, his goodness, his good works, his good deeds, his religious practice, all of that has forced God's hand. God has no choice but to accept him the way he sees it. And he can look at that tax collector and he feels like he has pushed himself to the front of the queue. He can look at that tax collector and legitimately say to himself, at least I'm not like him. At least I am holier than thou. And now he believes that God cannot reject him. He believes that he has sealed his own fate. He has made himself righteous before God, and no one can say otherwise. Can you hear the desperate fear in his prayer, in his self-centered arrogance? He's afraid to trust God. He's afraid to trust in God's provision. He's afraid to trust in God's mercy. He's afraid to trust in God's promise, in God's covenant. He is afraid. He's afraid to fall because he cannot believe, he cannot trust that God in his love and his grace will pull him up. He reminds me of a person who's drowning. You know, when a person is drowning, their reason, their discernment, they all get switched off in the brain. Literally, they are taken over by their fears. Their actions are governed by their fears. And trained lifeguards know that when a person is drowning, they will actually resist being rescued. They will actively resist being rescued. It's not because the person is stupid or because they're foolish or because they're hard-headed or stubborn or bad. It's because they are desperately scared. So desperately scared that they can't possibly trust. All they can do is flail and try desperately to push the water down to pull themselves up. And if they could use their reason, if they could think it through, and they saw a lifesaver swimming out towards them, then that drowning person, what would their thinking process be like? They'd say, this is good news. I'm not doing very well with this trying to save myself business. But here's somebody with a red and yellow cap on and zinc on their nose. I'm going to let them give me the commands. I'm going to trust them to take me into shore. But they can't do that. The drowning victim cannot do that. They're unable to because they're overwhelmed by their fears. And a trained lifeguard knows. A trained lifeguard knows that a drowning victim, you can't just swim up to a drowning victim and offer your hand. You can't just reach out to them. They will fight you. They will resist. They will undermine your rescue, and lifeguards know that they can take even a strong swimmer under in their fear and their panic. No, a lifeguard needs to hold back, needs to tread water and wait for the person to thrash themselves out. Or if they're a very skilled lifeguard, they can find a way around and under, and they can sometimes give them a boom in the face or a hold that restrains them, something that allows them to stop fighting, to be brought safely to shore. Now, I've never had the experience of drowning in water, that panic. But I have had times in my life when my reason, when my discernment has been overridden by my fears. I have had times in my life when my faith has been washed over by my fears, overwhelmed. So I don't know about you, but I can put myself in this Pharisee's shoes, in his sandals, trying to measure himself against someone else, trying to insist that he's got the formula, trying to declare himself righteous. Well, thank God I'm not that bad. I can understand. Can you? Have you ever been there? Have you ever created in your head that righteousness scale? Have you ever found yourself comparing yourself to others, maybe envying some, maybe detesting others? If so, then hear this parable. This is a parable of hope for you, for me, and for the Pharisee. Imagine that you were stranded in the Simpson Desert. I know this is such a cheery sermon. Imagine that you were stranded in the Simpson Desert. And you know that there is a spring, fresh water, life, 2 days walk away. And you have just enough water to get there, you and your buddy who are stranded in the Simpson Desert. Now, you know that this, because you're looking at your map and you can see that this water is to the east. But your buddy says, I'm not going to be guided by any map. I have a sense for where water is. And so instead of going east, your buddy decides you're going to go west. Now, you want to save your buddy, you want to help your buddy, but, made their own choice. They went west. So you go east. But unfortunately, your reckoning by the sun and the stars is just a little off. Not much. Just a fraction of a degree. But over the course of 2 days, that fraction of a degree has you missing that spring. Now, do you find yourself in that imaginary situation? Can you imagine yourself saying, well, this is bad, but thank God I'm not like that guy who went the other direction? Thank God I didn't go 180 degrees in the wrong direction. I was just a little off. No. If you've missed the water, you've missed the water. It doesn't matter whether you miss it by 300 kilometers or you miss it by half a kilometer. If you've missed the water, you miss the water. But here's the thing. Jesus doesn't want you to miss the water. And he doesn't send us out on a hunt to go and find water out in the middle of a desert. No, that is not who Jesus is. This is not a test. Jesus comes to us, God comes to us in Christ as living water, not a fearsome sea to envelop us and drown us, but no, a living water to refresh us, to renew us, to revive us, to redeem us, to reconcile us. Living water that comes to us, an endless stream. He comes to us, he comes to you in love and grace to meet you where you are, whether you are where the sinner and the tax collector are, whether you are where that Pharisee is trying to find yourself on the scale. He comes to you where you are. And he draws you to where he is. He draws you to where he is. That tax collector gets that. He pounds his chest and prays, God have mercy on me, a sinner, because he trusts God. He's not beating himself up. He's opening himself up. He trusts God. Maybe it's because he's in a place where he's so desperate that he's ready to trust God. But for whatever reason, he opens himself up. He trusts God. He trusts God, believing that God has the power to lift him up, believing, trusting that God has the love and the grace to raise him up. And that tax collector, Jesus says, went home justified. Justified before God. Not bumped up a few notches on some righteousness scale, but justified before God. Brought from where he was to where God is. My sisters and brothers, Jesus lived and died and was raised to life so that you and I might go from this place justified. So that you and I might be justified before God, not because of how good we are, but because of how good God is. And so that we might be bearers of love and grace, of the love, hope, and compassion of Jesus Christ in this world. May it be so, by his love and by his grace. Amen.